Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm very excited to bring you together for this panel, Women in Technology. We're going to have a great conversation. This is like the hit parade of women in tech, and you're going to really enjoy hearing what they have to say. So just quickly, who we have on stage. Hopefully you guys were here this morning to hear the keynote. If not, you'll be able to see that online. But Laverne Council from the Veterans Administration. Teresa Carlson, our fearless leader here in AWS Public Sector. Helen Sun from our partner Motorola. And Beth Ann Bergsmark from Georgetown University. All right, so I wanted to start out just by having each of the panelists talk a little bit about what brought them into technology and how they found themselves in technology, whether they sort of started out wanting to go into technology or found themselves there, through a different path. So, Laverne, you want to start off?
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm real pleased to be here. Real quickly, how did I get in technology? At the age of 14, I was actually one of those people identified because I was very good in science and math. And I went to Purdue for the summer. And Purdue put together a whole engineering program. And I found one thing was very clear. I wanted to go to campus when I went to college because it was real cool living away from my parents. And two, that there was this thing called engineering that allowed you to sort of create and think outside the box. And there was a lot of other people like me there who were doing that. And there were girls and boys that were doing it. So I think at the age of 14, I knew I wanted to do something where I could create and something where I could leverage what I enjoyed, which was math and science, and be okay with it. And so that's really where it started. And my first job was as a programmer analyst in COBOL and Assembler. And after doing that for a while and getting my MBA, I really wanted to go into the business side and leverage IT. And then I did that as a partner, focusing on global supply chain management and technology and competitive advantages. And then went to work for Dell, and then went to work for J&J, and then taking the president's call and doing this appointment to help Veteran Affairs.
Teresa, I know your path was a little bit different. You started out doing something else, so why don't you let us know what brought you to technology?
My path, I left because we have literally hard, coders, developers here, which I think is amazing. My path has been more on the business side of tech. I'm pretty technical now today. I think sometimes I scare my team a little bit. I'm definitely not. They're like, oh, you know that. So, but after you've been doing it for about 17, 18 years, you sort of have to understand it. But mine, I started off as a speech and language pathologist. So I tell everybody I was scientific. My father would have liked me to have been a little bit more mathematical since he taught my math. I was good at it, but I always avoided it. But the science part, I love science. And actually, I'm just going to fast forward because I spent a lot of my time in healthcare and healthcare consulting. And I got into tech, I decided to make a complete career change. And I like to tell that story because I tell everyone today it's just very possible to make a career change at any point in your career, especially if you feel like you're going to really enjoy something. And I was hired by a small tech company, software company at the time who was a Microsoft Gold partner that did workflow and document management, a lot of work in the public sector space, had a lot of work in healthcare. And I moved over to sort of help them. I ran marketing and business development, and I ran the product marketing. And it was interesting because I will never forget when I walked in and the CEO offered me the job. I said, I'm a paper pusher, not a paper automator. He goes, I think you can do this job. And I tell everyone, from the moment I saw the technology workflow and document management in healthcare that we didn't have, my world literally opened up. And I thought, where have you been all my life? And it has literally been a journey of love and technology. And I tell everyone when they ask me, why do you think that you actually have had a successful career? I tell them it's because I love it. And I made a switch in something that made sense to me. because my career has been spent on connecting not just the technical side, but the business and mission side of technology. Because I know all these ladies up here understand this. Technology is great, but if you can't connect it to the business, it's very different. So that's really sort of how my journey in technology has started, and I think it's still evolving.
Helena, you've told us some interesting stories about your early career in technology. Would you share a little bit with the rest of the audience?
Absolutely. So I took a lot of twists and turns in terms of my career. I grew up in China, in Shanghai, and was always very strong with science, math as subject areas. But by the time I had to choose which university to apply and what major to focus on, my mom, who was actually the head of HR for an engineering firm, and told me that as a girl you probably want to choose a suitable career that will get more suitors, like being a teacher, more marriable. So for an 18-year-old, what's more important than having more suitors? That aside, I applied for a college, Shanghai Normal University, and I took English as a major. And then I taught 5 years as an English teacher after graduating from Shanghai Normal University at Shanghai Institute of Education. And came to States and started, going on my master's degree and doctoral. Decided to choose educational technology as major, but then computer science and information system as my minor, and just completely fell in love with programming and problem-solving aspect of things. And I found myself sitting in the lab for 5 hours in the afternoon without getting up once. Time just flew by. Whereas, another class on research design, I got up every 20 minutes walking around trying to write a paper. So you can just see the difference. And I think I found my passion in technology and just sort of found my way back into the space that I enjoyed it since. So,
Beth Ann, can you talk to us a little bit about your
Great.
career?
So I definitely did not start off in computer science and engineering. In fact, my degrees are in fine arts and political science, which I think were the departments furthest away from computer science. And I'm not sure as an undergrad, I even spoke to anybody that ever was in the CS department. But what was a fantastic opportunity to me is that when I was in graduate school and then teaching as an adjunct faculty member, an academic computing department had a grant to digitize images for the art history department and build software around it. And they really found after a while that it might be easier to hire someone with an art background and train them how to program than to hire a programmer and teach them how to communicate with the art history faculty. So that's how I jumped into ed tech. And this was in the early 90s, so this was right when the World Wide Web was coming out. And there's a lot of debate on campus as to whether it was a fad. It wasn't. It really stuck. And I really spent that first part of my career building the bridge between the engineers, the faculty, the students, if you can believe it or not, teaching people what the internet was, teaching people how to use email. And it was right when we sort of had this sort of surge in interest in technology across the campus, where it was no longer just in the traditional STEM departments, it was in the humanities departments as well. And I loved the idea of all of a sudden this promise of accessing content anywhere, anytime, how that could have changed my educational experience, how that could help my students, and it was really that art of the possible. When I look at our students today and I look at my own kids, I see that same excitement. And it's not about the idea of accessing content. That's a given. They already know that's all out there. But it's this idea of innovation and invention and how excited they are about tech. And I think that, for me, discovering tech a little bit later was fantastic. I really, looking back, wish that I would have taken CS classes, done a CS minor. And we try to do a lot of work now in terms of encouraging our female students to consider those options, because it really can open avenues in every discipline you can imagine.
Great. So thinking about that, early exposure to technology that you were talking about, Teresa, I know you've championed Code.org's Day of Code and Code in the Cloud in the Classroom days. Can you talk a little bit about your thinking on what is important to not just young women, but to get young people especially involved in coding and in understanding technology?
Well, let me put this into perspective. Since I came off stage, I've had 4 meetings, and every meeting either the meeting began or ended with, we need help, we need more job skills, we need help creating, like we have tons of jobs. One was about actually a not-for-profit NGO that's actually doing work in Africa that are training individuals to be coders, which I loved, which was like fantastic. But really coming to Amazon Web Services and seeing that we are, you know, the premier group, we are the thought leaders in cloud computing in this whole new environment. There's so many jobs. And the one thing I didn't get to talk about on stage, I did a job search last night on the number of cloud jobs, just cloud related in the Washington, D.C. area, just to see what I came up with. And I got over 7,200 jobs just in this area. So imagine worldwide the number of jobs. So two things. If we're not, number one, helping create those, right? Create those lifelong learners of cloud, which I know that Andy Jassy, our CEO, is really, he talks about this a lot. He understands, we understand it's our responsibility and obligation to be helping with this. But the second is really that we can be an enabler from the very early days of this. But then thirdly, that women represent over 50% of the population. That's crazy not to have more women getting into the field of information technology. And that's really what we want to encourage, is from the very early age, like we saw Izzy talking about it in Madison last year, to all through high school and college, and them sustaining that effort, not, you know, really, and it has to start early or they're not going to sustain it, I fear. So we want to do that from the early primary years, all the way through being a lifelong learner, instilling sort of cloud computing and the new ways of doing development.
Yeah. You know, I think there's been certainly a stereotype of technologists being male, and you know, we see that out sort of in the world, and we also hear a lot about young girls being just as interested in math and science as boys, but then, you know, somehow they decide, oh, that's not a very, you know, feminine or female thing to do. I'd love to hear from each of you what you think about that, about, you know, how we can help change that perception, or whether you think the tide is shifting there.
I'll start.
Go ahead.
So over the weekend, I was actually watching some games with my 14-year-old, a boy, and he's very interested in computer gaming and started to get interested in computer programming as a result of that. So there's actually a new sport called e-sport that's really, really popular nowadays, and the game he watched and played quite a bit, it's called Leagues of Legends. I don't know if anyone here have heard about it. And then I watched the 2 sets of games with him yesterday. 4 teams, 5 players on each team, all of them young kids, male, no girls. So I started to get interested in that, and I asked him, I said, did you see other girls in your classes play? And he said, no, not really. And I did some research at night and see, girl video game players and Leagues of Legends and all of that. Their turnout, actually, there are a lot of teenage girl video game players, and this is an area that once you get interested, they will get into programming and developing mods and developing games but there are girl players, they are just not as vocal. And there are also research saying that girls are just not interested in talking out loud, voice communication like on Skype when they're playing in the online games. So I think it has a lot to do with perception of girls don't want to be seen or just don't feel comfortable. So I think that the perception is still there, biases are still there, and maybe, I start to think about maybe we should sponsor a girl video game team or something of that nature, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's our next project to do.
I'd love to feed into that too. I mean, what's interesting to me, I was at a conference, I was talking to a number of my colleagues, of course, the majority of them are men. And we were talking about the gaming. I mean, I have a 9 and 11-year-old that play Minecraft. And what's amazing to me is that it seems to be really crossing those gender boundaries, where the girls, at least so far, we're entering middle school now, so we'll keep watching this, they're playing as actively as the boys. And they're playing together in a combination of build, code, mod, Sometimes it gets a little edgy in their Minecraft realms, but then also supporting each other. It's almost like a group community type of gaming environment. I really wonder if these new types of games that are really more simulation in nature attract both sides of the gender. Because in terms of talking to my colleagues, they'll talk about, Dungeons and Dragons is what they remembered, and I don't really remember playing Dungeons and Dragons. So finding those more inclusive places. I think what's really critical also is that, especially as the mother of an 11-year-old, is that they're really searching for identity. They're scared to be the only person in the room that looks like they do. And creating, to the extent that you can, through community service, volunteer opportunities, even if it's just like play dates together and bringing girls together with boys, being part of that conversation, to create those environments where they feel comfortable interacting, as opposed to just shaking your head and say, oh, well, too bad that there aren't any girls in this camp and now you don't want to go to this camp. So a combination of confidence, doing what you can to create those environments, and if you are a woman in tech, or especially to really be out there and let them see you, because they need to see themselves in that role subconsciously.
Yeah, I mean, that Minecraft effect, I think, is significant. That's my daughter is Izzy, who was on stage, and she got interested in game design and programming by doing Minecraft, and the classes she took were 3D game design and Minecraft programming this year. And mostly she's kind of an entrepreneur and wants to build some cool things that she can charge her brother to have access to in Minecraft, and he'll do it. So she keeps an online bank account for him of what he's got earned.
I would say that yes, there's the stereotype of what an executive even looks like. Sometimes it's not necessarily that it'll be a female, and certainly there have been and still are instances where people assume they know what I know and what I don't know, just by looking at me, which is highly offensive, but it happens, and it happens quite a bit. It is fascinating to me what people would assume by looking at you, and it goes to Gladwell's book of Blink, where people will say, well, certainly I have no stereotypes in my mind. I'm an open thinker, but yet they will assume just in seeing me that they know what I know and what I don't know, what I might be interested in. And so technology is no different. I was sharing with my husband last week, I went into the post office, and they had some stamps up on the wall, and I tell the clerk, I said, I like a book of those stamps. And he looked up at the wall and he said, the African American stamps? And I said, no, I wanted the planets. I like science. I wanted the planets. And I think it caught him, and should have caught him off guard, because he made an assumption, and it was a huge one, but people do it every single day. And if I'm in the airport with a blue suit on, I'm a flight attendant at best if I'm moving that luggage through. And I generally will answer people's questions because I'm fairly familiar with what's happening in airports, so I'll just go along, especially if they're senior citizens. I feel like the senior citizens, they don't know any better, so I ask. Occasionally I will send them the wrong way. I know, it's shame on me. But no, I just think people do have a point of view. And I think also, people used to say, men don't make passes, that women wear glasses. That's a lie. So, it's just not true. Men like smart women, just like they like any other kind of women. I've been married 27 years, so we're very smart, handsome man. But the bottom line is, all that doesn't matter. What matters is that people are doing things they have a passion with, that they love what they're doing, and that they're given opportunities to do it. And so, my whole belief is the opportunity. I always tell people a cyclops can work for me. As long as they can do the job and they want to be there, they're welcome to come on in. I'm going to give them that opportunity. And I think that's what most people want. They just want somebody to meet them where they are and hear them where they are, and sort of get out of all the other spaces that we tend to get into when we're trying to position someone. I will tell you, one of the fascinating things that often happens is that people will challenge. So, they'll come into a meeting with me and they'll try to talk about something highly technical, and I will chuckle. Because that's like the favorite thing, because it's the favorite thing to do, because it's sort of like, okay, so the point here is what? You want to see if I know what I know or I don't know what I know, and, how you play that game. Sometimes I play it very mischievously, and I one-up them more, and then they take it, and then they can't take it any further. Or I'll say, well, tell me more. And I will get to the point that they realize they can't tell me more because they studied that one thing that they were going to come into the room with and snuff the boss. But it's crazy sometimes how we have to get out of our own way. And, I lived in Europe for 3 years. I saw a little less of it there, more because of gender issue than racial. But I think in the various roles that I've had, in the States, you run into it, and not with everybody, just with some people. It's different. That wasn't what they expected. I'm not what they thought they were going to see, and shame on them.
It's interesting when you said people, sort of have assumptions about, what you might be interested in, right? Mm-hmm. And they sort of, judge you. I remember my first technology company that I worked in. All the servers were named after Star Trek things, and I was talking to one of the coders, and he was like, thought, oh well, you wouldn't understand, and I was like, oh, but I really love Klingons because they have 2 sets of vital organs, and you can't kill them very well. They're a warrior species, and he was like, oh, the trade show girl is, one of us, but I am interested. We were talking a little bit earlier about how women leaders can then see things in their employees. Maybe they can have different assumptions about their employees or be able to recognize talent and bring up more women. So I'm interested to hear from all of you what you think about that, of having women in leadership positions and how that can help encourage a next generation of female leaders in technology.
Well, I think it automatically changes the dynamic. And I think now is really the time, as leaders, whether you're male or female, to really look at your workplace dynamics and your team dynamics. I mean, public sector, many of us are operational IT. I mean, we're all going through this extraordinary change and extraordinary opportunity in IT. And, in some cases, it's very challenging to sort of marry the communication styles of men and women, but it can't be more challenging than marrying the communication styles of a developer and a longtime infrastructure person as you pull them together. So really using this opportunity of change, to challenge what are some of those team dynamics, communication styles, and perception. I mean, I think, a concerning statistic that I saw recently from the Harvard Business Review was that 50% of women leave the STEM career for what they characterize as hostile workplace. And they weren't characterizing the traditional sexual harassment environment, but isolation, not feeling part of the team, not being able to, be seen as an equal. Mm-hmm. And I think that some of that really comes from, whether right or wrong, perception is what it is, perception and amplification of communication style. So as a leader, I think we can create team dynamics, agile teams, areas where we're pulling from across our organizations for diversity, gender, and skill set in a way that really leads to a better outcome in the end anyways. And those actions alone help make everybody feel part of the group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Helen, do you want to talk a little bit about anything you've seen in terms of encouraging the next generation of women in technology?
Yeah, recently I think there are a lot of discussions and focus nowadays about diversity, and that's really, really good and important. So one of the signs at Motorola Solutions was the CEO of the company recently nominated 3 lead VPs, female VPs, to participate in a program called Leading Women Executives. It's just great to be in part of that program. We have 3 sort of cohorts from one company, so you start to build that network of supporting each other, and that's a fantastic opportunity to be in that position. And the most important part, I think, being part of that program is we got to meet female leaders in different areas, and just having seen those role models who made it, who done great, CEOs like Federal Signal, Vice Chairman of Northern Trust, and just incredible female leaders and learn from their success story. I think that role model alone is tremendous. And we all have that opportunity to provide that role model for others. And one other interesting thing that we learned through the program is that there is this second generation or unconscious bias that happens, towards female leaders in the space. And one of the concepts is called double binds. I think that has been talked a little bit about. So if a female leader is too outspoken and strong, and she, the likability of her is going to go down, she'll be considered as aggressive. But if she's more soft-spoken or laid back, and the comment is, she doesn't have the executive presence. So sort of a double bind going on. I think number one is to build awareness. So at Motorola, we are starting this training program called Unconscious Bias that go on, sponsored by our HR department, going on each of the department, having that conversation. One of the examples I ran into, and I just hired a senior leadership in my team, and it was interesting that the same comment came from my peers, and my boss was like, do you feel that she's a director level or senior director? Feels like, doesn't have the executive presence. That hit a nerve with me just big time. So I got on the phone and went on a long conversation. Give me an example. What do you mean by that? So in those situations, it's very important to ask for specifics.
What's the data point?
Exactly. What's your data point? What do you mean? What exactly do you feel? And how do you compare to this? And so those are the things that I think we'll continue to battle, but it's important for female leaders to bring awareness of this type of unconscious bias that could happen in workplace and fight for what you believe in. So.
Well, I just want to say, I thought the women on stage today that were up there were fantastic. And they were all women presenters, right? And they did a pretty good job. And you know what? Guess what? We didn't have to look hard or long to find that. We had a long list, in fact, of amazing women that we thought would do a fantastic job today. I would like to say about this topic that the one area that I really like to see women have an opportunity is to just take on some additional roles and responsibilities to show what they're capable of. And because what I find generally with the women in my organizations today and in the past is sometimes they have skills that are not recognized as much because there's so few, that they're doing their job, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, wow, I think they have skills to do X or Y, and giving them the opportunity to really fill a gap, fill a hole that's out there, and really showcase talents. And I do, whether we like it or not, there is still, little things that occur. I laugh a little bit being in a tech company because guys can dress in their hoodies. If we dressed in hoodies every day, it would be, as an executive, it's like that wouldn't fly. I can tell you right now, it'd be like, wow, what is she coming to work looking like that for? So there's still, and I laugh. I tell everybody my book I write's going to be 20% more. Because I said 20% more is what we need to look as good to show up. So we just need 20% more before we walk out the door.
Yeah. We talked a little bit in our conversation before this about sponsorship, of finding sponsorship and finding somebody who would sort of help you. I'm wondering if any of you could tell stories of either having a sponsor who helped, see something in you and help you along the way, or if you have an experience of being a sponsor for somebody and how that worked. And would you like to start, Laverne?
I can give you quick examples of both. Actually, when I was working as a program analyst, my supervisor was a gentleman by the name of Al Blair. And I share this story because I always tell them, everybody needs their Al Blair. And what happened with Al was that, as I was coming in and the work that they were giving me, even though, at that time you went through a training, and if you got through the training, then you got a job. Some people didn't get through the training because the training was fairly rigorous, and then you got to be the draft pick. And I was the number one draft pick, right, of that class of people. And and so the work they were given, I was just getting it done, and you know, it was fairly simple, and he kept progressing, and he kept giving me opportunities, and he gave me more opportunities. And then one day, I never forget, he looked at me and he says, "Kid, you can do more." He said, "You're bigger than this, and you can do more. You can do things that I would never dream about, and I want you to really know that you can." And what he proceeded to do was really to move me into the business roles in a very aggressive ways. And I was like the youngest person doing many things for this large corporation because Al saw it. And when I stepped into those roles, I filled them. And, you know, age was only an issue to the people that knew how old I was, because I was always an old spirit. I think I was born an old lady. And so, you know, so the maturity was there, but the age wasn't. But he saw that. And so when he went to the CEO of the company I was working with and said, you know, this person here should recruit every IT person we hire. And I did. And they weren't hired unless I said they were. And I guess I was 23 maybe at that time. And I think everybody should have an Al, you know, and to somebody who can remind you or see you in a different way that you can see yourself. For me, I've had many experiences like that. I think it's my obligation. I think every leader's obligation is to think about how they're spending their day to help their people. And, you know, it's an imperative. And I think the more senior you are, the more you will do that. And many times in the male and the female dynamic, I often tell people, I said, you know, most of the people that asked me to mentor them were males. In particular, they were white males. And they would, you know, Laverne, can you mentor me? Can you mentor me? And it always threw people off. They're like, what? Wait, that seems odd. Not really. Because they were smart men. And they said, well, if she could get there, well, think about it. She can get there. It's something she figured out.
That's right.
And there's something that she knows, and I want to know it. And so, you know, they were really bright. The people that wouldn't ask were the women. And the women wouldn't ask because, one, they didn't want to be asking for anything because they didn't want to be seen as needy. But two, they didn't see me the way the guys saw me. The guys saw me very differently than the women saw me. And I think sometimes people can't get out of their own head. In particular, sometimes women can't get out of their own head. They won't. You have to ask. It's okay. You have to network. It's okay. You have to not care what anybody thinks about what you're going to say and what you're asking about. If it's the right thing, you need to just do it and deal with it later.
Go ahead, Beth Ann. I think that's great. You know, one of the nice things of working in a university is that, you know, you work with partnerships within the community, you work with students, and I mean, we've got a lot of good examples where, you know, we're trying to build those mentor and inspirational stories early. Georgetown partners with an at-risk high school that takes students who have a very high likelihood of dropping out, and they actually end up with, I think, a 90% graduation rate at the end. And we took one of the interns, and she was 15 years old. She would be the first person in her family to graduate high school. And I was talking to her, you know, how her experience was interning with our web team. She said, well, I'm so happy, and my mother is so proud. I've always told my family that someday I will have a job working in an actual office on a computer, and I will get paid to do this. And my brother says, no, it's not going to happen. It won't happen. And she had actually built websites for our medical center as an intern. And her mother is proud. She's thrilled at what she can do. She can see herself in that position, that she can actually realize that she's had that opportunity. And I think that was fantastic, not only for her, but also our staff being able to work with her. We also have Dr. Lisa Singh, who's one of our computer science faculty members, about 3 years ago, started a group, GU Women Who Code. Just an idea of creating, you know, an external mentoring program, offer some Python classes in the evening to attract women undergraduates that may not consider CS and computer science. The expectation in the first year was maybe 20 students would come forward. There were 200. By the second year, it was 400. I checked, the group has 500 in it right now. And the last coding party in March had about 100 students come out for the evening and pizza and coding. And the majority of the students were not originally CS majors or minors. I mean, a number of them have decided to be CS minors afterwards, but they'd been interested in coding, they'd liked to learn, they weren't sure how to get started, they didn't want to change any of their academic plans. They've had these plans since they were 10, so that's not shifting yet. But they wanted to explore something different. And many of them were also really excited about this idea of how can I use code to solve the problems of my time? How can I use code to solve problems within my discipline? So they'll take those skills back into leadership roles across many different fields. And they've been going strong now for 3 years, and it's a phenomenal program. So I think that doing things like that.
Can I just say something on that too? I think that's a really interesting model because it's sort of this viral model that shapes up where you can encourage those to work together, and it's almost like, come join me, this works. And coding, we say all the time, coding is pretty much going to be in any job that you're doing moving forward. So it's important to have these programs. And I just wanted to share really quickly, I had Helen come to our sales kickoff this year, and I interviewed her, and we had gone to a local school in Las Vegas to have a cloud career day. So it was in a really diverse area of Las Vegas, and 60 members of my team, which I was really proud. They all did this on their own, pulled it together, and they did this cloud career day. Well, when they got there, what they didn't realize, there was a nationally ranked robotics club there. And they found that the robotics club the coach was a female, and the president of the club was a female, beautiful African-American young woman, senior. And she was just so impressive. Helen and I were fighting over her, saying, well, you're coming to Amazon. She said, no, you're coming to Motorola. But that could be a selling point. Although we can send them to Seattle.
That's right.
But the interesting thing about her is we pulled her impromptu on stage in front of like 300 women, and she and the coach, and she sort of dominated the conversation. This senior young woman really, it was so amazing to watch her level of confidence. And some of the women at AWS asked a few questions, and one of the questions they asked her was, well, how did you get involved? And she said, well, I was a sophomore and I was in sports. And one of my friends invited me to come do the robotics club. And she said, when I got there, the only thing I was disappointed in, there was only 10% girls. And the next question was, well, now you're saying there's 50% girls. How did you get the girls involved? And this was another great story. She said, the coach and I talked, we talked, and we ended up, what we found when we observed is that the young girls that were coming into the robotics club were quickly told by the boys, no, you can't do this. Right. And she said they all backed off and took like administrative roles. They just quickly just said, okay, and took administrative roles. So she said what they did is they separated them, and they took the girls and they did overnights. They did like parties and overnight, and they taught them how to use the robotics tools, what to do, how to work them, how to do the coding elements, and did a few weeks of this, and they got confident. They brought them back together then, and when they brought them back together, it was the girls saying, you get out of the way, I know what I'm doing now. And so as a result, they were able to recruit, the girls started recruiting other girls, and now they're 50% female, and they're nationally ranked. And the story, it was just a really good story, and I think just for, sometimes you forget what you know, and what I think for us, what you know is sometimes it's not a bad thing to separate to learn and then bring back together or learn in common groups.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think one of the things she said was a lot of girls actually tend to want to ask the boys, how do you do this? I'm not good enough. But once you separate them, she has to figure it out on her own. And she found her own strength. That's, I think, what's really important and inspirational for us.
So in our last few minutes, I wanted to ask each of you to give one piece of advice that you would give to a woman who's earlier in her career, or to the guys in the room to encourage other women that they are in their lives or they work with.
I would say that clearly the world is populated through the capabilities and physical capabilities that women have. Those should never be a hindrance to anybody reaching their full potential. And and that also includes the males that are engaged in their lives, and the things that you want to bring to your children's lives should never stop you from reaching your full potential. And I also believe that one of the things that you have to do as you're going through your career and you're going through life, and there will be ups and downs in that life, is that be true to who you really are and what is the choices that you make. And you don't have to apologize for the choice you make to be a parent, or you don't have to apologize if you're a dad or a mom. The only thing you ever have to do is do what you say you will do. And if you do what you say you will do, that should be enough for most folks. And if it's not, they're not the right folks. So, there's no need to apologize through life. There's more of a need just to be and show up as you say you will and have that integrity. You can do that. Everything else will work itself out.
And one of my tried and true, I say it all the time, but as females, I think, especially in the tech world, believe it or not, I look at it as an opportunity versus a deficit. I think you have an opportunity to shine. And I do, the whole thing about hashtag smart is beautiful is it's not about complaining, it's about moving forward. Because if all we do is sit around and talk about what's not working, it's not gonna move us forward. So I would say the opportunity is vast for women in tech. So define what you wanna do and do it. And just, you heard me say, find a hole and fill it. Sort of shine on the things that you're really good at. And because my career was sort of built around doing things that other people weren't doing, and I was like, that's a big hole, and we gotta fill that. And when you start showing that you're doing things that are needed to be done and you can show those results, people take a look and they're like, wow, that individual has real potential. And I know that each and every person in this room has real potential to probably go even beyond what you thought you could do or ever dreamed you could do.
I would tag on that. I totally agree with that. Just on a personal note, if you look me up on LinkedIn, you'll see I zigzagged quite a bit in my career, and it worked really well for me. I'm not saying quit your job or find something that just do differently. Actually, to the opposite. A best friend of mine who actually just had one job all her career. After graduation, she went to work for China Eastern Airlines. Now she's the CEO of the Oceania division. Just one job that did really well. So I met her in Australia last year and asked her, how would you become so successful? What did you do? And she said, I actually moved around within the company quite a bit. I learned different things from operation to sales to staff. I didn't sit around. So I think my advice for you is just, always have a fire in your gut. And if you feel that there's not in your tummy anymore, and you feel like the job is easy, I'm coasting for 3 months, find something new to do.
Yeah.
I'd also say to, always be confident. I mean, if you're the only person that looks like you in the room, don't worry, you won't be alone for long. Others will join you over time. And then the second, too, is really to realize, the speed and the rate of change is phenomenal now. And if we look at what's coming down the pike, the cloud revolution is really, in my opinion, the first move with what's coming down with the Internet of Things, the speed of the customer. Organizations, they have to be fluid, they have to be agile, they need to embrace their millennials, not be stuck in these very archaic structures that they were in the past. And that really, I think, opens the door to many people that may not have had inroads in the past. So to find ways to embrace that, embrace the change, build the diversity, and again, don't be afraid to be the first one out there.
So I encourage,
Before you end, I'm going to challenge everybody in the room again, get involved, find an opportunity to mentor someone, even if it's do what is within what is your capacity. If it's an entire university or a classroom or a club, just do something, enlighten people to the world of technology and the opportunities. And next year, Trish and I are going to have a lot more with students. We're going to do some coding championships. We're going to do some things fun next year. So if you guys want to help or you have ideas, give us the feedback, because next year we're going to go back to the convention center, and you're going to see us doing a lot more things, having students involved. K through 12 to the university level. So if you all have ideas, tell us.
and please join the movement. Connect with us on hashtag #SmartIsBeautiful. And please join me in thanking our great panelists. Great discussion today. Thank you.